is winning the war on terror and banditry. Our target is to eliminate all threats of Boko Haram, banditry, kidnapping for ransom, and the scourge of all forms of violent extremism. Within 1 year, our government has eliminated many Boko Haram and bandit commanders faster than ever. As of the last count, over 300 Boko Haram and bandit commanders have been eliminated by our gallant troops in the northeast, northwest, and some other part of the country. We have restored peace to hundreds of communities in the north, and thousands of our people have been able to return home. It is an unfinished business, I agree, which our security agencies are committed to ending as quickly as possible.
Yeah, Mr. Majid Dahiru is here with us this morning. He's Technical Director of the Terror Leadership Center. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
So quite a number of things playing out lately. Security concerns, which we'll talk about. Then the elections coming up tomorrow in Ondo State. But let's start off with security. Oh, yes, the president early in the year speaking about their commitments. But recently, the army did raise concerns about this the Karawa group, even though our guests did tell us, well, they're not exactly new. They've been there for a bit. But he says, yes, there may be concerns, but he kind of just tapered it all down, saying, well, yes, they would need to do what they have to do. But let me get your impression about how this is even with us in the first place. How did we even get here?
Thank you very much. And let me say that this is the first time in a long while that we're getting a very precise response from both the leadership of the armed forces and the political leadership of the state concerned. As it concerns this group, whether it is new or old, but as it concerns this Lakurawa group that has been identified and designated as a terror group. So the army is telling us we're going to go after them and decisively deal with them. That is quite a definite statement that should come out of the leadership of the armed forces. But there's something interesting that the state government actually said about this group. They described the group, according to the deputy governor, as a faith-based group. And that brings us to the answer as to how we got here. You see, northern Nigeria has been fertile for as long as one can remember in incubating, germinating, and growing the seeds of radicalization. And what you see happening by way of Boko Haram insurgency is simply a violent manifestation of a prolonged period of indoctrination and radicalization that has been rife in northern Nigeria. And this is precisely the reason why when you have splinter groups out of the Sahel, rather than making a landfall in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, Benin Republic, and other countries that share border with the Sahel, it makes a landfall in Nigeria. When Libya was destabilized, Nigeria bore the brunt of that destabilization more than any other country along the west coast of Africa, because there is a fertile ground that incubates, germinates, and grows seeds of radicalization into a monstrous cancer of sin by way of insurgency. Lakurawa is just one of those groups. And we're likely to see more groups like this in the future sprout from this very fertile ground.
We don't learn our lessons?
Because we've not done anything to make this land not so fertile anymore for such groups.
What is constituting the fertility of those grounds?
Political Islam in northern Nigeria.
Political?
Islam. Islamic separatism of all kinds. When the Salafi movement made a landfall in Nigeria in the early 70s, northern Nigeria lost that secularity that was the old northern region. When Samadu Bello was able to weave a mosaic of religious and ethnic groupings into a comprehensive northern identity under the banner of Ariwa that was as Christian as it was a Muslim, or in essence, neither Christian nor Muslim, that was all inclusive, we began to see a shift towards Islamic revivalism. Do not forget there was a history to this region too, as a part of Africa that straddled the southern part of the Western Sudan. They had jihadi movement in the 19th and 18th centuries, which of course we experienced in Nigeria, which birthed the Sokoto Caliphate. There is this longing, there is this, aspiration to kind of reenact an Islamic state in Nigeria, particularly in the northern part of this country. And politicians have latched on this sentiment to politicize religion to the extent that they began to promise, through politics and democratic structures, the realization of this ideal Islamic state through the implementation of Sharia in some of the 19 northern states of sin. And this group, for instance, like the Boko Haram group, before they went rogue, before they became violent, shared the same approximate ideals with these politicians and the political class. So, for instance, what is the difference between a group in Sokoto that is mandating the going of beds and trying to impose and enforce morality through a pseudo-judicial system, and the Hizbah group in Kano, for example? So, in essence, we need to roll back all of the elements and ingredients that have made northern Nigeria a fertile ground for incubating and growing these terror groups.
Didn't they see a need to do that in the first place?
We are no longer in the position to even contemplate this, because what is happening in northern Nigeria is a religious and cultural self-immolation that is threatening to incinerate the entire country. Today we have in Lakurawa, the entire country is battling to put out the fire of Lakurawa, after we're battling to put out the fire of Boko Haram for more than a decade now. So this self-immolation is incinerating the entire country. And so the question is, for how long will the rest of non-Muslim Nigeria be willing to share this burden and to endure this incineration, this collective incineration? And so northern region today has become the largest slaughter slab of human beings in Africa, arising from terror groups that are linked to religion. Boko Haram on one hand, banditry on the other hand, and now you have the Lakurawa group. We must, as a people of the region, the leadership, the religious class, the political class, we must begin to reverse the embellishment of radicalization in the mainstream. I said it because the seeds of radicalization are not sown on the fringes of the Muslim community in Nigeria. It is in the mainstream. It has to be reversed, as other countries have done. Saudi Arabia has done the same thing. Other countries have to reverse it. You see, you need to reconcile the fate of millions of Nigerians with their Nigerian nationality and citizenship. Right now is a conflict arising from Islamic separatism that is being churned out every time, every day, from every nook and crannies in the Muslim North.
Well, one would ask, there's a few things that immediately come to my mind. First, you talked about political Islam. And we saw that, in the early 2000s when the Zamfara state governor, actually introduced Sharia. And we saw the initial conflicts between himself and, President Obasanjo. I think eventually he had his way. But we've since seen, if you were to look at Zamfara today and all the other states that say they want to adopt Sharia, you would think that the people by now will be wiser, that this Sharia is political in nature. It is not bringing the El Dorado, which we thought it was going to bring. And it would seem that these laws are only applying to a certain class of people. It doesn't apply to, people within a certain cadre. So by now, do you think that there is sufficient evidence to be able to convince the people otherwise, that this is just about pulling a wool over your eyes?
There is, but the problem is, you see, there is, should I say, an alliance of some sort between the political class and the ulama class in northern Nigeria, which now forms what you call the northern political establishment. So that collaboration ensures that the people are continuously made to have this same belief and have this ideal, while the politicians will pretend to be wanting to bring this idea to reality in nations of political support. So you see a lot of religious tokenism being thrown up here and there. So, for example, you saw a group of politicians or parliamentarians in the National Assembly the other day coming up with a bill to expand the frontiers of Sharia and the Constitution beyond personal matters.
Is it connected?
These are just things to impress upon the people that they are carrying on their religious.
They're doing something.
They are doing something in that regard. And the more you do this, the more you allow people to receive initially such groups as Lakurawa that come in as a religious group that is intending to do that which the politicians has failed to do comprehensively. So people still do that as an Eldorado to this whole concept. But I'll tell you this for free. You see, the Nigerian constitution, as secular as it is not in conflict with Islam or any other religion. In fact, it enhances your Islam because it allows you the uninhibited practice of your Sharia faith. For instance, as a Muslim, I do not take alcohol because of my religious beliefs. There's nothing in the constitution that compels me as a matter of citizenship obligation to take alcohol. The constitution does not compel me to steal as a matter of citizenship obligation. So everything that I'm not supposed to do as a Muslim, the constitution guarantees me the right not to do same.
So why are you seeking the expansion of the...
Because you want to impose your own will on others. And this is a secular state. And Nigeria must remain secular for the interest of all of us. So the step towards reversing this trend is to secularize northern Nigeria. We must dismantle all religious imprints in government structures. We must separate the state and religion effectively and dismantle all religious laws that have been imposed in northern Nigeria, dismantle all of the structures like Hizbah and Co., dismantle it. We need to secularize the North as it was in the First Republic. In the First Republic, you didn't have such challenges. The North was progressive. There was nothing like Boko was haram. That was why the Northern region was able to be the largest university in West Africa, in northern Nigeria, by a Muslim leader. But today, there is a conflict now as to whether Western religion will neutralize our faith as Muslims, if we will embrace it wholeheartedly. And you have scholars that are daily, as we speak, churning out ideas that are polluting the system, and the politicians that are benefiting from it, because there's another aspect to it that benefits the politicians, and that is identity politics. In 2023, for example, it was scandalous for anybody who is citizenship-minded enough to realize that the two leading parties had to pick candidates from the Muslim North, either as running mates or as candidates. For example, the APC picked a Muslim from the South and had to back that candidature with a Muslim from the North. The PDP just changed its own voting formula and picked a Muslim from the North. You know why? There is this general consensus that has been accepted that the Muslim North will always vote for religion in every electoral cycle, irrespective of the competence or otherwise of the contending candidates. So if political parties are kowtowed to that, consensus because of political gains. So this is what benefits the northern politicians, that makes them reluctant and not see the danger that this whole system portends for all of us collectively.
Yeah, but the people who, because we know that during Boko Haram, there were scholars and there were, let's say, ulamas and teachers who were willing to actually counteract this, ideology of Boko Haram. They did so at the expense of their lives. Some people will say that it's not very popular. What this ideology which you hold, this stance which you hold is not. In fact, if anyone, the fact that people can say this is owing to the secularity of Nigeria. But there are places where you will be in danger to say things like this. So I'm wondering if the political class do not see the need for it, and they know the amount of work they will have to do to roll it back, who exactly are we going to turn to?
It has to be the leaders themselves. It has to be the leaders of the region. The Muslim community today must have a self-realization, must come to a self-consciousness as to the fact that what you practice in Nigeria is a Muslim religion that is not even Islamic. I've made this point severally. You see, the most Islamic of states is not the one that is totally dominated by Muslims or that is governed by Sharia. An ideal Islamic state, in line with the tradition of the Prophet of Islam, are secular, pluralistic states where you have equality of citizenship of all, irrespective of ethnicity and religion or race, where there is fundamental human rights guaranteed to all, and most importantly, that is democratic in leadership recruitment process. So if you ask me today, countries of the West, like the United States of America, like Great Britain, like Germany, where you've seen an advancement in racial and ethnic and religious integration enough to produce apex strategy for these countries that do not come from the majority demography. These are the most Islamic of states. While the countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran in the Middle East are simply Muslim states, Muslim countries. Because I'll tell you this, as a Shiite Muslim, I will not have the freedom to practice my Shiism in Saudi Arabia as I would in the United States of America. Similarly, as a Sunni Muslim, I can't practice my Sunni Islam as I would want without inhibitions in Iran, as I would in Great Britain. So even for Muslims, we have more freedom to be Muslims as we deem fit and understand in these Western countries than so-called Sharia-dominated countries. So I say for a pluralistic country like Nigeria, where you have a mix of all faith groupings, you can't introduce your own brand of law, especially when the existing legal code in the Constitution guarantees you absolute practice of your Sharia faith. So rather than wanting to amputate somebody's hand for stealing, don't steal. Rather than want to flog somebody for consuming alcohol, do not consume alcohol, abstain. Rather than wanting to stone someone to death for adultery, you do not commit adultery. That is what the Constitution has guaranteed you. If, for instance, the Constitution compels us as Muslims to carry out any of these vices as an obligation of citizenship, you can now say, no, my religion does not allow this. And in fact, the Constitution has bent over backward to accommodate inheritance and marriage rights within the Constitution so that it becomes justiciable. This is more than enough. So what I'm saying in essence is, we must secularize this country, beginning from northern Nigeria. Though you have jihadi groups sprouting out in the north and not any part of the country, except where it is fertile, where it is receptive of these ideas. It is very easy to penetrate the community using religion. So when people tell that this group has been in the northern part of this country long before they became terrorists, it was because they were using religion as a bait to gain legitimacy amongst the people. That's all.
So tell us then, since you know how challenging it can be with religion in this country, yes, how do we approach this? We do not have a choice. The Muslim leadership in this country, starting from the Sultan, the political leaders must at this time begin to do what other countries have done. Nigeria is not the only country with a significant population of Muslims. Egypt is a majority Muslim country, but it is a secular country. Turkey is a secular country. Tunisia is a secular country. That's why you do not have Islamist groups that have jihadi ambitions taking root in these countries. The solution to Boko Haram, the solution to all faith groups that have gone rogue and intend to go rogue, is to secularize the society so that you do not create that fertile ground for their ideologies to be accepted in the first place. You must do that work. We must radicalize the entire society. It's not enough to take a few people that have gone rogue already and take them to a camp and think you can radicalize them alone and bring them back to a society that is heavily radicalized. Look, I know what I'm saying. And until we have a change of heart, look at what happened with the young lady in Sokoto, Deborah Samuels. She was accused of blasphemy. And not a single voice came out to say no. It's against the laws of Nigeria to carry out mob action on somebody who you allege to have committed blasphemy. You saw prominent religious authorities coming out to air their support for that level of barbarity. What do you expect people in the region, why do you expect them not to aspire for the ideal Islamic state where, in their opinion, blasphemy will attract this same level of punishment legally? So, in essence, what I'm saying is, what you see Boko Haram doing or Lakurera is putting to practice what has been preached over time and still being preached. What is still being advocated for by politicians just to gain political support. So they're not in a hurry to lose their privilege, as we speak, because if you have an enlightened society, some of them are not being in this privileged position that they are in today, but the country is collapsing around us. And again, the rest of Nigeria cannot continue to fold their arms and watch us be the trigger for the collapse of this country. So they need to also speak up and not play the ostrich and shy away from issues like this. They need to identify these
issues and put it on the table. We need to de-radicalize. We need to go back to the true practice of Islam that is tolerant.
Because part of what you're saying, because if you look at those countries you mentioned, look at Turkey, look at Saudi Arabia, even Iran, look at the development and the research and the breakthroughs they're having in all of those areas.
Yes.
But we don't seem to see a lot of these things here. We seem to be religion,
on one hand, and Al-Majiri on the other hand. So we need to change. We need a cultural kind of revolution in the north. And the time to start was yesterday.
Well, that's on the one hand. What about those who will say, well, maybe what we're seeing, as you talk about northern Nigeria and, being the trigger point for the collapse of this country. And those who also argue that what about the other separatist groups in other parts of the country? Isn't that like a replica? The only difference is that this particular one seems to be using religion as the anchor point.
Thank you very much. And religion is a very dangerous thing to use either for political agitation or insurgency. You can resolve the problem of national militancy today if, for instance, you increase the reservation from 13% to 25%. We can bring it under control. In fact, the fact that the government of Obasanjo established the NDDC, the dual government established the Ministry of Niger Delta, and we've seen some, some movements here and there in terms of giving more back to the people. You've seen that situation being brought under control. It's economic in nature. It's tangible. You can resolve it materially. IPOB issue in the Southeast, for example, was largely political. You had the government under President Muhammadu Buhari that decided to marginalize the entire region. So that feeling of not being wanted pushed them towards that other option of a Biafra ideal state. But you would agree with me today that that fervor seems to have dropped because of just one single action that the president took, the current president, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, by appointing a Southeasterner as one of the service chiefs, the chief of naval staff, who comes from Enugu State. You can see that that tension in the Southeast appears to have been doused. And you can see that he's doing more in terms of the appointment between himself and the rest of the region, even when he did not get up to 5% in any of the states in that region. He did not use that as a basis to engage with that part of the country. So you can see that elite engagement between himself and the progressive of that region, it is being resolved. But religion is when somebody has been promised a higher goal, some level of utopia after the afterlife. He's doing everything possible to secure a place there. That is the opium of religion. That is the poison that comes to religion. And we're saying religion should not be this destructive because it is clear that God created man in his image. But man has created God in his own imagination as a vile, wicked, destructive God that is full of hatred. We need to recreate that in our imagination. And I'm saying that the responsibility for this is the Muslim authorities themselves. The drivers, the ideas, the ideology, the indoctrines driving Boko Haram is still very rife today as we speak. It's not been, there is no attempt to reverse it. That was why when Governor Rufai attempted to regulate religious practices and preachings, I supported it. I believe that no preacher has the right to come out and preach anything that can constitute a national security threat to the country. You shouldn't preach against people of other faiths. You shouldn't preach against people of other ethnicities. You shouldn't preach things that tend to create separatism in the minds of a particular section of the country against others. You shouldn't do that. It should be illegal. So, but beyond this, we need a consensus. We need to come together, seeing that our region, the Muslim North, has been the epicenter of the consequences of many years of radicalization that has gone on unchecked. It's not Lagos that is being bombed by Boko Haram. It is not Port Harcourt that is being ravaged by Nakurawa. It is Sokoto, the seat of the caliphate. It is Borno, the oldest site of Islam in Nigeria, that's being ravaged by Boko Haram. So what this should tell us that we have embarked on self-evolution for so long that it is now instigating the entire country. And we must put the brakes at this time.
Well, just one more thing before you go. Tomorrow, Ondo State citizens will hit the polls for elections. I know several people have said, look, this happens time and again, and it may be a similar narrative. Even though INEC you say, look, yeah, we're putting everything in place. What will your impressions be on this thing?
You see, the greatest tragedy of our democracy is that there are no alternatives. So the people of Ondo have no alternatives to choose from. There are no clear alternatives. The PDP and other opposition parties have not been able to come out clearly to oppose by example. In a democracy, you have failure of leadership. We can always talk about failure of the ruling parties.
Yeah.
But there's even a much bigger issue of failure of opposition. Nigeria has a problem of failure of opposition. We've not seen anything radically different from what the APC is doing, either at the center or the state level, by the PDP. We've not seen. So the people of Ondo today are going to this poll not having a clear idea of what to choose from in terms of tangibles in good governance alternatives. It's not there. So things like ethnicity, religion, and of course monetary inducement is going to decide who will be the next governor of Ondo State.
Wow. Well, it's up to them to prove everybody wrong.
Exactly.
So we'll see what happens. Mr. Majid Dahiru, thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.